I told my fiancé about the threesome because I thought honesty was my ticket to a clean slate. Everyone says I sabotaged myself, but they weren't there when he cornered me about my number at his parents' anniversary dinner with Cabernet flowing. Now his family shares articles about modern promiscuity on Facebook. Mark moved out Tuesday, and my mother won't return my calls. The real problem isn't what I confessed, it's what I held back while trying to look evolved. I swore I'd never tell another soul the full story, but watching Mark post engagement photos with someone whose biggest secret is shoplifting lip gloss in ninth grade, I really need you to understand what actually happened, starting with why I did it. I was 27 when it happened, not some clueless co-ed. I'd been at Sinclair and Associates for 11 months, pulling 80-hour weeks on a hotel project that was supposed to be my big break. My Bushwick rent had just jumped $300, and my student loans were a monthly hemorrhage. Mark and I were 6 months into what everyone called a mature relationship. He was a financial analyst who represented everything my chaotic upbringing hadn't: stability, a family that still ate Sunday dinner together, a credit score above 750. What I haven't mentioned is my mother's voice in my head. She'd called the week before Mark's family dinner, her tone tight with judgment. "Men don't marry women with baggage, Diane," she'd said, despite her own 2 divorces. "They say they want honesty, but they want a clean past more." Her words metastasized. The hints were there. Mark once mentioned a female colleague who'd been around the block and how it was sad she'd never settled down. He used the phrase wife material for his brother's girlfriend, a kindergarten teacher with only 2 partners. He'd kissed me after sex and whispered, "You're so pure with me," a compliment I took as proof I was successfully reinventing myself. The small decision came when Vanessa Sinclair's invitation appeared in my work email. "Drinks Saturday, just a few of us," it read. I'd received these invitations for months, always declining politely. But that week, I'd been passed over for a project lead role in favor of a male colleague with 6 months less experience. I was angry, tired, and feeling vengeful toward a system that rewarded pedigree over performance. The thought that flickered through my mind wasn't about fairness, it was that Vanessa's invitations suddenly looked like a different kind of opportunity. So I said yes. Not to the threesome, not directly. I told myself it was just a work gathering. I wore the black dress Mark loved. I told him I was working late. That was the first real lie, the one that made everything else possible. What I didn't realize was that I was already planning how to edit the story if I had to confess later. The night itself was surreal. Derek and Vanessa lived in a Tribeca loft that looked like a museum of their own success. After 2 glasses of wine, Vanessa's hand was on my thigh, Derek's on my shoulder, and I was calculating the cost-benefit analysis with each touch. When they invited me to the bedroom, I didn't say yes because I was drunk. I said yes because I was ambitious. When I stumbled home at 2 a.m., smelling of their expensive perfume, I already knew how I'd frame it for Mark if I had to college experiment, ancient history, meaningless. 3 weeks later, my promotion came through. Project designer with a $12,000 raise. Vanessa took me to lunch to celebrate, her smile knowing. "We take care of our own," she said again. I told Mark the raise was for my work on the hotel project. I convinced myself that keeping secrets was worse than lying by omission, that I was protecting him from a truth he couldn't handle. My best friend Sarah called the day after I told Mark about the threesome. I'd made it sound like a distant memory, a youthful indiscretion. "Why would you volunteer that?" she asked, not unkindly. "Mark's family still says grace before dinner. You've handed them a loaded gun." I defended myself with borrowed feminist language. "I won't apologize for my sexuality," I said, the hypocrisy so thick I could taste it. The public me was evolving, but privately I knew I'd traded intimacy for a title. The truth I was sitting on was this: the threesome wasn't 7 years ago in college. It was 20 months ago, and it wasn't spontaneous. Vanessa had been grooming me for months, inviting me to gallery openings, introducing me to her inner circle. When she finally made her move, she used language I understood. "Derek sees such potential in you, we both do." The subtext was clear. I chose to read it as opportunity. What I'd told Mark was a lie by timing, making it seem ancient history when it was recent and transactional. The relationship damage started small. Mark stopped initiating sex, citing stress at work. Then he stopped sleeping over, claiming his apartment was closer. I found him checking my phone when I was in the shower, his face tight with suspicion. When I confronted him, he said he was just looking for a restaurant, but his cheeks flushed. Then Mark found the email from Vanessa, the one inviting me to the Hamptons for Memorial Day, signed XOXOV. Why is your boss's wife sending you kisses? He asked, holding my phone like it was contaminated. That's just how she is, I said, reaching for it. He pulled away. Vanessa's European. She's from Ohio, Mark said, his voice cold. The tease of worse secrets came that night when I couldn't sleep. I'd told Mark the threesome was a one-time thing, college meaningless. But I'd gone to the Hamptons twice more that summer, each visit ending the same way. There were photos, videos even, that Vanessa had taken. I'd let her, drunk on the power of being included. Mark didn't know about the trips, the photos, the way I'd started to enjoy the transactional nature of it. He didn't know I had a folder on my laptop I hadn't deleted. The consequences began to multiply. Mark told his brother, who told his wife, who told Mark's mother. Suddenly, our relationship wasn't just ours, it was a family referendum on my character. His mother started sending him articles about pair bonding and emotional baggage, which he left open on the iPad we shared. I tried to fix it by explaining more, which was like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. I organized a weekend trip to Hudson, booked the antique he loved, and during dinner at a farm-to-table restaurant I brought it up again. About that conversation, I started, but he cut me off. Can we just enjoy our meal? The silence that followed was louder than any argument. My justifications became more desperate, more philosophical. I'd corner him with questions about sexual double standards, about why his past was experience, while mine was baggage. I'd quote studies about how women are judged more harshly, all while avoiding the actual facts. The social dimension exploded when we attended his college friend's wedding. His fraternity brother's wife pulled me aside during cocktails. I just think it's brave, she said, her voice syrupy, that you're so open about your past. Some women would be ashamed. That night, Mark got so drunk he couldn't stand, and I drove us home while he muttered about not knowing who he'd been sleeping next to. He'd never been drunk like that before. I'd broken something in him. My worst decision came when he asked point-blank if Derek was still in my life. I looked him directly in the eye and said, I deleted his number the day after we talked. Technically true, I deleted it from my phone, but I had it memorized. I'd also kept Vanessa's contact info, just in case I needed a reference. I told myself these were professional precautions, not emotional ones. But the breadcrumb I was dropping was that there was one more secret I couldn't bring myself to name. That secret was this: I wasn't just involved with them. I was being paid. Not directly, never directly. But there were bonuses, referrals, a spot on a coveted project that should have gone to someone more senior. I'd received a consulting fee for a private project that involved nothing more than showing up at their townhouse. I told myself it was consulting, that my time was valuable. But I'd kept the Venmo transactions in a separate folder, buried in my email. The breaking point stretched across 3 weeks of mutual self-destruction. I stopped sleeping, instead scrolling through Mark's Instagram followers at 3 a.m., trying to decode which women he might be comparing me to. I stopped eating real meals, surviving on coffee and protein bars I stole from the office kitchen. My work suffered. I submitted renderings with wrong dimensions, missed a client meeting because I'd been crying in the supply closet. The self-sabotage peaked at his sister Lily's engagement party. I'd had 3 gin and tonics on an empty stomach, and when Mark's aunt asked how we met, I launched into my entire relationship history. You have to understand, I slurred. I was finding myself. Lily, who'd introduced me as her future sister weeks before, physically turned her back. Mark had to half carry me out. My public facade became a grotesque mask. I'd smile for photos, my arm around Mark's waist, while privately calculating how many weeks until our lease ended. I pushed away the few people who tried to help. When Sarah brought soup and said, "Tell him everything or let him go," I accused her of siding with the patriarchy. I told my mother I was being sexually shamed, and she asked if I'd considered therapy for my choices. The person who got hurt worst was Lily. She'd been planning to ask me to be her bridesmaid, had bought a card that she later posted on Instagram, found this while cleaning. Funny how things change. The card was addressed to me. When I'd asked her advice about a dress, she texted, "I'm sure whatever you pick will be unforgettable," which I recognized as code for "please don't embarrass me." The direct question came on a Sunday morning when Mark found me reorganizing the closet for the 3rd time that week. "Diane," he said, his voice flat, "were there others? Other things I should know? I could have come clean." Instead, I snapped, "Should I have kept receipts?" He didn't speak to me for 3 days. The setup for the biggest revelation was happening without me realizing it. Mark had started talking to a lawyer friend about protecting assets. He'd moved his documents to a safe deposit box. He'd started looking at Astoria apartments. The foundation had collapsed. I was just performing denial while debris settled. The worst truth, when I finally forced myself to speak it in the therapy session Mark demanded I attend alone, wasn't about the threesome itself. The full confession started with, "I need to tell you something about my motives." What I revealed was this: the encounter with Derek and Vanessa hadn't been about sexual exploration. It was a calculated transaction. I'd overheard Derek discussing layoffs, and Vanessa had hinted they took care of their own. I'd seen it as primal networking. The most damning detail was the $15,000 bonus and promotion that followed. I'd effectively sold my body for career advancement. This revelation reframed everything. I wasn't just sexually adventurous. I viewed intimacy as transactional. The defensive peak came when I tried to explain this to Mark over coffee after 3 weeks of silence. "It was my body and my career," I said, shaking. "Everyone uses what they have." He looked at me like I'd spoken in tongues. The immediate fallout was swift. Mark said he couldn't look at me without wondering what I'd traded for our relationship. "Did you even love me?" he asked. "Or was I a good deal?" The first major consequence hit when my firm's HR director called me in. Someone Mark's lawyer friend had sent an anonymous tip about unethical workplace relationships. They were investigating. The final shoe dropped when Mark learned about the recording. During one encounter, I'd captured audio on my phone, not for blackmail, I told myself, but protection. When Mark found out, because I'd broken down and told him, somehow thinking it made me look less vulnerable, he looked physically ill. "You recorded it," he repeated. "What kind of person does that?" The aftermath spread like a toxin. I was placed on administrative leave while they reviewed my file. Derek denied everything, claiming I was disgruntled. The email from Vanessa disappeared, server error, it said. My professional reputation, built on late nights and good designs, was now filtered through scandal. Relationship consequences were absolute. Mark didn't just leave, he annihilated our shared life. He took the TV, the couch, even the air fryer his mother gave us. He left the engagement ring on the nightstand with a note: "I can't wear something that represents a future built on lies." His sister blocked me. His mother posted his new engagement with the caption, "So grateful for godly women." My reputation in our social circle vaporized. The couples we'd vacationed with in the Catskills suddenly had full calendars. The group chat went silent. When I ran into Mark's college roommate at the grocery store, he pretended not to see me. Even my professional mentor, the architect who taught me to own my power, emailed to say she was removing my name from a conference panel. "Given the situation," she wrote, "I think it's best to avoid the optics." The woman who taught me to own my power was now distancing herself. The moment of genuine self-awareness broke through during a pathetic night eating pad CU on the floor of my half-empty apartment. I finally admitted I'd traded sex for career advancement. I dressed it up as empowerment, but the truth was simpler. I'd made a transaction and lied about it to the man I claimed to love. My current state is this: I live in a Queen's studio I can barely afford, work as a freelance renderer for architects who don't know my story. I eat dinner at 10 p.m. while watching house renovation shows. I haven't dated in 8 months because I can't face, so, what do you do? Without wanting to scream. The reason I'm telling this story now is simple. Mark and Claire's wedding invitations went out last week. Sarah sent me a photo. It's at the same barn in Hudson Valley where I'd pictured saying my vows. Seeing his name next to hers made me realize I needed to tell someone the whole truth. Not the sanitized version I gave Mark, but the entire ugly reality. If I'm honest, I told Mark because I wanted to test him. I wanted to see if this man with his Jesuit education could love the real me, the version who makes pragmatic, sometimes amoral decisions. I thought giving him the middle version, the college experiment narrative, would make me the honest but reformed woman. What I learned is that honesty without context is just another form of manipulation. I wasn't confessing, I was editing, testing. And when he failed the test I'd set, I blamed him for not being able to handle my truth. The moral ambiguity is this: I still believe the threesome itself wasn't wrong. It was consensual and strategic. But the way I weaponized partial truth, the way I used honesty as a shield while hiding the actual crime of my motives, that's what makes me unmarriable. Not the sex, but the calculation. So here's where I leave you: if I'd told him the whole truth from the start, the career calculation, the recording, the bonus, would that have been better? Or is the real sin that I ever thought my body was an asset to leverage? Mark thinks I'm not wife material because I slept with 2 people at once. But maybe the truth is I'm not wife material because I still can't decide if I regret what I did, only that I got caught in the lie about why. You tell me, which version is worse?